Hey, it's Freitag. In this podcast, we interview business owners in New Hampshire and beyond to get their perspective on work, growth, and of course, the weekend. Join our host, Freitag marketing owner Jan Ziegler, as he interviews fascinating guests. We hope you'll enjoy this episode.
Hello, it's another episode of It's Freitag. My name is Jan Ziegler, and today I'm joined by Todd Horner. Todd is the Executive Director at the Southwest Regional Planning Commission. That's a lot of syllables. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
So we're just talking a little bit and got to know a little bit more about you. Tell me again, sort of how you ended up here in the region, because you grew up in Maine. What got you here?
In one word, agritourism. But to give you a little bit more of the backstory, I came here in 2009, what I thought would be a brief stint in the region, working on a maple sugar farm in Ackworth, New Hampshire. And one thing led to another where I was interested in conservation and natural resource preservation and agriculture. And I ended up working on a couple farms in the region and then started my own operation based in Peterborough. And that was the bulk of my 20s.
That's so cool. So do you still have that farm, or is it like a side project?
Still in operation, but it's under new management. It was a kind of an interesting setup. I was leasing land at a co-housing community called New Benusset Neighborhood and Farm. And the concept was, instead of building a house, a bunch of houses on their own 3-acre lots and, large tract subdivision types development, they clustered all the homes close together so that they were able to preserve farmland. And then they made that farmland available to me as a farmer to grow food, both for the community and the general public. So it's kind of an interesting, non-traditional farming setup.
Because that seems very non-traditional, because I feel like around here, the old established ones, they have land leases for haymaking, corn, all these things. But most newer farmers buy all the land that they farm, right? Like there's very little non-owned farmland to use for them.
Yes, it's either, passed down to the family, or there's a succession plan in place, or, the farm is actually a side hustle and the spouse is earning income off the farm. But in many cases, it takes some creativity for younger people or new people to get on the land and start farming.
Just because land's so expensive.
Yes. Yep.
And farming doesn't pay all that well.
No. Yeah. No. Beautiful lifestyle in many ways, but yeah, you're not going to get rich probably.
It's true. Plus, all the economics, it's ridiculous. Anyways, so then you went to school.
Went to grad school down at UMass Amherst for regional planning. There is a through line if you squint enough. I spend less time on the tractor these days, but still thinking a lot about how we as a society steward, inhabit the land, and what that relationship looks like.
Did that come really out of the farming background of okay, I want to have an organic farm, but I don't have access to land? You were like, oh, maybe that is something that interests me in a grander scheme?
Yeah, so the co-housing community where I was farming, and I was also renting land at a private school. So I was definitely not homesteading. I wasn't, off on my own, farming. It was farming in community. So it was as much about cultivating positive relationships with neighbors and supporters and customers as it was about, how do I grow fantastic carrots or tomatoes, or, obviously want to do that as well. So transferring to planning is kind of this kind of similar dynamic where we focus on the municipal level, like how within any given town you make decisions about what can get built where, what are areas that should be protected from development, how does that shape who we are as a community, our identity as a community. So there are a surprising number of transferable skills from running a farming community to being a planner.
Yeah. And so you were a planner at Southwest Regional Planning Commission, then they made you an assistant director, then they made you shortly after the executive director. Tell me in very simple terms, as somebody who knows nothing, what do you guys do?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that I should really hone my 90-second pitch on. In short, we help towns with public policy issues like housing, transportation, economic development, We are, in some ways, a nonprofit public think tank is maybe one way to describe what we do, because we are a unit of government. We're a public sector agency, but we have no taxing authority. We don't have any regulatory authority. We're there to advise, guide, provide support to towns so that they can achieve their own goals.
Okay, so where does the funding come from?
Yeah, so a piece of it comes from our member communities. So we have 33 member towns that pay membership dues on a per capita basis. And that is, of our roughly $1.4 million budget every year, that's about $100,000. So it's an important but small slice of our funding. A lot of it comes from federal grants. Some of it comes from private philanthropy, and most of it is project specific. So we need to hustle to find new projects, new partners, new funders. So although we are technically a unit of government, we operate much more like a nonprofit.
Because that was my question. It's like, okay, because the unit of government thing, I was like, okay, well, at least you don't have to worry about money so much, but you do.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And, living in a state like New Hampshire that has, very real fiscal constraints. We, regional planning commissions, we're one of 9 across the state. We need to hustle to make sure we're delivering value to our municipalities and demonstrating value to funders so that we can find new projects and add new benefit to.
Walk me through what like a project is, and how that benefits the communities that you work with a project. I mean, I know you do many different ones. Pick one.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And just to give you a sense, I'd say right now we have probably 40 or so active projects. If I had to pick a number, just off the top of my head. And let's see, kind of one that I like to highlight because it's not very, it doesn't glitter, or maybe it might not be too exciting to your average member of the public. But one thing we do each summer is we actually have a field crew that takes our van and drives to a community and actually assesses and maps all of the stream crossings that run under the streets and roads in that community, and uses a statewide protocol to understand, is there erosion happening there? Is the culvert caving in? Can aquatic organisms pass through it? Fish, primarily. And one reason why this work is really important is because when there's severe rainfall, those culverts can fail and lead to flooding that can cause property damage and in some cases loss of life. That's happened in our region. And as severe rainfall becomes more common and extreme, it's going to be more important for our municipalities to understand where those assets are located, what state they're in, and which ones they should fix or upgrade first.
And I think that sounds kind of like, in the beginning, I'm like, where are you going with this?
Yeah.
But then now it makes complete sense, right?
Thanks for sticking with me.
Yeah, because I understand we have, like, you work with these communities, that their highway department might be 2 full-time hires, right? Like they don't have the expertise or the equipment or the time, because they're just roadside mowing all summer and fixing potholes. Like, they don't have the time to dedicate to that. And then if you look at like these heavy rainfall events, I mean, look in Vermont, like they've gotten like flooded 3 summers in a row, plus probably like the dollar value that it costs to fix that, even if nobody dies, like just how expensive it is to fix it, especially on like the town's budgets when it comes to how the town maintain roads that they have, which like it always blows my mind, like how many miles of road every little town here has. It's crazy, like miles per capita or something like that is insane.
Yeah, it's a lot for a town. You throw it in the bridges as well. It's a lot.
It's true. So, and then on a sort of greater scale, you also, like, let's talk a bit about housing. How do you help sort of your members and the municipalities with that?
Yeah. So I guess one of the most concrete ways we help with that is one key role that we play is resource connector. So helping towns connect with each other, but also to connect with higher levels of government that might have funding opportunities to support things like housing. So we are grant writers and grant administrators that help nonprofits and others access those funds. And right now we're helping administer a couple of grants that are supporting work at the Roosevelt School up on Washington Street in Keene that's being redeveloped by Keene Housing into affordable housing. So that's probably the most concrete way that we play a role in the housing arena. We also work with towns on regulatory reform. So it's perhaps becoming more well known how local land use regulations like zoning can affect what can get built where, including housing, and what types of housing can get built. So
I've heard Marlow mentioned a few times.
Okay. Well, really all of our communities are thinking about it or talking about it to a certain extent. And in many cases, the zoning that's on the books may have been there for decades, going back to the 80s and 70s, when New Hampshire was experiencing a pretty significant wave of development coming up from the south in Massachusetts. And that caused concern among many communities. Like, we need to put the brakes on that because it's moving too quickly. The issue is that many of those regulations are still in the books, and at a time where we're finding we need more housing, that can pose a barrier.
And also, I would assume that there is, like, in terms of like these zoning committees, planning committees in these little towns, there's not all that much subject matter expertise necessarily, right? Because I mean, there's tiny little committees with, whoever they can find. They're not planners.
It's a steep learning curve. Yeah. And I think zoning and planning is fun, but, I'm a nerd in that respect.
The old home days committee is much more fun.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And so finding people to step up and who are willing to do that work, towns wouldn't be able to function without that volunteer effort. But yeah, they're learning on the job, and it can be a fairly lonely pursuit because, most people, when they hear the word zoning, their eyes glaze over and you kind of like lose them. So good luck going home and talking to your wife or husband about,
zoning issues.
Zoning issues. So one way that we've been trying to address that is by organizing what we're calling citizen planner roundtables, where we'll host or we'll work with a community to host one of these, typically in one of the smaller towns, bring together folks who are serving on planning boards to talk about, what challenges they're facing. There might be a little bit of decompression or like venting, which is actually valuable in some ways, and also to help connect them with resources that might speak to problems that they're experiencing.
Cool. That's super fascinating. And so as the executive director, you guys have a decent amount of staff, you have a decent sized budget. What do you spend your days doing?
Yeah, it really varies, but day to day. Like I said, we connect our towns with our higher levels of government. So maybe it would be helpful for me just to walk through my day today. So this morning, I reviewed part of a master plan that our staff has been working on for the town of New Ipswich, and we'll be meeting with them in a couple of weeks to talk through that draft. Then I had some internal conversation about what's known as the 10-year plan, which is something that the New Hampshire Department of Transportation develops once every 2 years, that basically lays out the capital improvements for our transportation system across the state.
Which is super relevant, right? Because that's a lot of funding for a lot of roads and bridges that need replacing and that kind of stuff, right?
Yes. Yep. And they have a fairly extensive process for engaging local communities on what that plan looks like, where the investment will happen. And so one thing that we try to do is, one, alert our communities to what's in the plan, maybe what isn't in the plan, and to convey to them that it does showing up does matter.
Yeah, because you're basically like an in-between, because you're helping the communities, again, that have very limited resources to pay attention to these things.
Exactly.
You're like, hey, members, lobbyists, lobbying has the bad rep in terms of the word, but you're basically the in-between, right? Advocating for them in both directions, but also telling them hey, this is happening, you should pay attention to this.
Yeah, advocating on behalf of our region and helping, folks in Concord understand how state legislation or investment decisions affect our communities and helping our communities understand where and how they can exercise their voice.
Okay, so but I interrupted your day. So
Yeah.
you looked at a 10-year plan of like New Hampshire Department of Transportation. What happened then?
Next, I was on a call with the New Hampshire Office of Planning and Development and some other Regional Planning Commission staffers putting together an article for Town and City magazine about resources available to volunteer planners. So again, trying to, create tools for, that planning board member in a small town that they can understand what's out there as far as help. Then I had lunch. Now I'm here. Next, I'm off to a meeting with a local childcare provider. We're putting together a grant application to support some facility improvements and workforce recruitment.
Okay. Cool. And so what does the future for your work look like? I mean, I know you said a lot of your budget comes out of federal grants, which I'm sure you're just as worried about as everybody else. And so for you on the radar is showing your value more, recruiting more cities, or is that kind of like capped regionally? Like what's kind of next?
Yeah, we can't really expand our market share.
Yeah, because is that like basically segregated into those 9 regions?
Yeah, so towns can choose which regional planning commission they are a member of, or they can choose to be a member of no regional planning commission. My focus is on delivering value to our current members so that they continue membership.
Are most towns like within your region?
Yes.
Cool. And so again, like with the grant challenge, like is it that you will need, more private corporate donors? Is that kind of like the strategy, or you're pretty confident, hopeful that like your funding isn't in as much jeopardy?
I mean, like many folks who rely on federal funding, we're kind of taking it step by step. Despite how fast certain things seem to move, in our work, there's often a 12 to 24 month lag time. So over that period, I'm still feeling like we have a solid path forward. My crystal ball gets hazier after that. What exactly our budget looks like, I'm not sure. I mean, some like looking to private, we have worked with private philanthropy to support some of the work that we do, working with towns on specific projects that they see immediate value in could be another approach.
The nature of your work is really like it's long term, right? I mean, like you start from like the beginning of thinking about a project to like something actually changing, 5 to 10 year time horizon.
I mean, sometimes the payoff can be more immediate. One example is I was lucky enough to work with the town of Marlborough on a grant application to renovate their library. And that was a couple years ago, and they're done.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're talking about a couple of years, but yeah, in other cases, it's much longer term. And that's one of our jobs, frankly, is to help our communities remember some of those long-term trends that they might not feel a shift in any given year. I mean, our changing demographics are a good example of that.
So you as a person who probably thinks in like a 20-year span maybe, what do you like right now? Of course, housing is like urgent, but I feel like it is, the awareness is now so high that it's a matter of time until the solution is there, right? It just takes a long time to go through the steps to build more housing. That just probably takes 10 years.
I would say even more than 10. I mean, this problem has been decades in the making, really. At least, the Great Recession of 2008 certainly was a...
So what do you think is the next one? Are you seeing where you're like, oh, this is going to come and happen, but nobody thinks about it much at all because it's not urgent yet?
Yeah. I just mentioned, but our aging population is one that I think about, and I think it connects with a lot of the other issues that we've been talking about. But, over the next 20 years or so, the number of community members that will be 85 years or older is going to triple approximately, and the 65 plus population is going to double. And that's going to have some pretty significant ramifications for the types of transportation services we need, our healthcare sector, our workforce, succession planning and business and, other organizations. And it's one of those issues that is on the time scale of decades rather than years or months. But yeah, it's also one that needs decades for solving for, right? Because I mean, like, you don't build assisted living facilities
in 3 years and you don't build transportation systems. I mean, that needs really big solutions to that problem. So you guys are hiring a regional mobility manager. Has that anything to do with that?
Yeah, that does connect.
What does a regional mobility manager do? Like, I'm genuinely curious. I have no idea.
Yeah, so in this region, we do have transportation services. There's the City Express bus in Keene. There's the Friendly bus that provides rides to older adults. There's a shuttle up to the hospital services up in Lebanon and White River Junction. We have several volunteer driver programs. We have Medicaid transportation services. Assisted living facilities have their own transportation service. So in an area that, your common understanding might be, there's nothing here. There actually is quite a bit, at least for certain populations, but often there's challenges in coordinating all of those different services. So they're not duplicating services and they're working hand in hand as much as possible and helping users, riders navigate those different options and what service might be the best fit for them. That, in a nutshell, is where a regional mobility manager plugs in, is helping connect both all of those different services and the people who use those services.
It's really funny because I recently, completely unrelated, somebody who's not driving needed to get to work, and I was like, wait, there's the City Express. Let me look into that. So I looked it up, and it's really hard to figure out how it actually works. But once you look at the stops, you realize it's actually a pretty comprehensive, inside Keene city limits, it's like a pretty comprehensive route. I mean, again, I don't think it's easy to use it, and it's not easy to but I'm like, it's there.
It's there, and it's really important to people who can't drive or don't have a car. It isn't the fastest way to get around because they are trying to serve as many people and places as possible.
On 2 lines, yeah.
With 2 lines, and the flip side of that is if you're trying to serve all those places on, 2 kind of big loops, you can only run a bus every hour, and that can lead to significant wait times.
I find that, I recently was moving, and I was thinking about, do I move to the outskirts of Keene? And I realized that unless you're in downtown Keene, you cannot live without driving daily. It is, and you can, ride a bike and that works, but it's really hard to walk places. It's really not walkable. And I think I always well, then I might as well just live outside the city, because if I'm driving, but I'm driving 10 minutes or 15 minutes, doesn't really make a difference. And that's always something that I kind of feel is unfortunate, because it's not geographically that big, but you still need a car.
Yeah, it's true. I used to live in downtown Keene or nearby, and I lived that bike lifestyle for, 5 years. And, the center of Keene it actually is pretty walkable and people do move to Keene for that. So I think it's a strength that the city can lean into. But yeah, once you get outside, up on the side of the valley, up on the shoulders, it can be challenging.
Cool. So let's switch gears a little bit. At the end of the podcast, I always talk a little bit about sort of, what do you do for fun on your weekends, and what are you up to when you're not planning cities?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the weekend, but just last night, my family and some friends went to pizza night up on Orchard Hill Breadworks, and it was the last pizza night of the summer, and it was, I don't know, they must get 400 or 500 people, it seems like. So, getting outside of town for good food is certainly one thing we do. We've been swimming a lot this summer. My daughter just started swimming lessons, so that's been, a fun experience. I used to ride my bicycle more, but just, family life has gotten pretty busy. I'd say a lot of my free time I sink into my garden, just because I used to be on the farm, and we do have a little bit of space at our place for gardening, so we've been eating cherry tomatoes and green beans, and growing food.
Cool. So you keep that going still on a small scale. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Todd.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, that is super fascinating because we actually hadn't met before, and I actually didn't really have a clue about what you do. So now I know a lot more. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, that was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a nice review wherever you're listening to this. It really means the world. Our episodes drop every Friday, so stay tuned for more insightful chats from It's Freitag.